Welcome to the newest episode of the Process of Fat Loss, where our goal is to help you understand the best way to lose fat and live a healthier life. Join us as we discuss some of the toughest and most valuable topics in health and fitness. Today, we're going to be talking about pasta and rice. Are they good for you? Are they bad for you? Should you be eating them? And are they making you fat? We'll answer these questions as well as a few others. So I'll get us started here with the first question. Are pasta and rice bad for you, and should they be avoided at all costs?
Well, let me first say I really have no issue with pasta and white rice, honestly. Of course, I don't like pasta or rice, so it's probably coming from the wrong perspective here. I'm not a big fan of those in general since I was a kid. But they both are relatively low toxic and are easily digestible for most people. But just remember the lens that we're looking through in this podcast is we're trying to help people with fat loss specifically. So the purpose of it is all fat loss. So that's to make sure we're looking through that lens through the rest of this podcast today.
All right. So before we get into it a little bit, can you just give us a really quick explanation of the insulin effect? I know we talked about it a little bit before, but just give a brief description of that.
Yeah, so we have an in-depth podcast. We'll make sure we link that in the podcast notes so you guys can find that pretty easily. But here's the simplest idea. Excess carbs in our system that aren't burned up through movement will be converted by insulin into body fat. Plain and simple. If you eat too many carbs, they will be turned into body fat if you don't utilize them.
All right, so let's get into talking about pasta and rice a little bit more. Do these foods have any nutrients that are valuable to us?
I would say no. That's pretty much the answer to that. Is like these two categories don't add any nutritional value outside of calories. So even if you decide you wanted rice, but in small amounts, let's say a quarter of a cup, you wouldn't get any nutritional benefit from that quarter of a cup, except for you get more carbohydrates. You're not getting micronutrients. You're not getting vitamins from it. So you're not getting, even like if you had a whole grain one, the fiber, we don't find fiber to be that important realistically for nutritional value. So I just don't find a lot through that. So when it comes down to both pasta and rice, they literally are just a source of carbohydrates. So one of our tenets for fat loss is that we don't want to waste calories on zero value food. So if we're going to spend time eating food, we need to get value out of it. So that's an important thing to take into account as we're going through things. Like, yeah, you could have rice and pasta. There's no negative impact in terms of health concerns, but they have a negative impact in terms of I could have eaten food that gave me more nutrients.
Yeah. So what about whole grains? Because I know they're often advertised as nutrient rich, supporting balanced lifestyle, have good fiber. And I hear people ask me all the time, like, can I eat whole grain pasta or whole grain or like wild rice, things like that? So are those better than other just regular pasta or white rice, or is there not really much of a benefit to those either?
I would say, in our opinion, so a lot of things, like if you guys listen to this podcast, things come down from the lens that we're looking through. We're looking through a fat loss lens as well as a low toxicity lens, all right? So low toxicity means when we tell clients our foods that we want them to eat, we're trying to have least toxic foods that don't cause autoimmune issues down the road. So we're trying to keep people truly healthy in the sake of healthy, not just eating for the sake of eating. So when it comes down to rice and pasta, I would avoid all whole grain options. And it actually is healthier not to eat the whole grain option than it is to eat like a white rice or a white pasta. So grains are seeds. And if you guys have listened to anything of ours in the past, we don't like seeds. And the fiber that you get from so the benefit of a whole grain is you get fiber from it. Fiber really doesn't have a negative effect, to be honest, but the positive, there's not enough positives because as that seed goes through, it will cause more destruction by anti-nutrient pulling of nutrients as it goes throughout. So it's better actually to have like a white rice if you're going to have one, because that's at least a fast digesting carb that you can actually utilize right away. A slow digesting whole grain is actually not good, because that slow digestion is that seed going through and pulling all nutrients down as it digests. I'd rather have something that's super absorbable into carbohydrates than something that's not. So yeah, my long story short there is whole grains are not good.
All right. So how about if we're trying to gain muscle? Then would you say rice and pasta have benefit in that case?
Oh yeah. I mean, especially a white rice or a white pasta is amazing for getting that calorie surplus. So it really depends. Gaining muscle is important in the spectrum of, are we trying to gain just lean muscle or what are we trying to gain? So if you're just trying to gain weight in general, if you have a young athlete trying to gain weight, eating rice and pasta, amazing. If you're a guy that's trying to gain muscle mass and not put on excess body fat, it can still be a very good tool. You just got to be careful with how much you eat, because a surplus of carbohydrates that aren't utilized will still turn into body fat. So that's why you'll hear the bulking stage, right? People, these guys are bulking. Well, they put on body fat while bulking. Why are they doing that? Because they're not burning enough calories realistically. They have to burn more calories and need that many carbohydrates. But white rice for sure is really digestible. The body really does really well with white rice. So it's pretty good for that, but only for gaining muscle would be the only time, and it really matters on your goals. If your goal is to have lean muscle mass, I would say white pasta is totally fine, but we could probably get that more for fruits and get more micronutrients based on if you don't want to put any body fat on with it.
Right. So now that we know some of the value or maybe lack of value of pasta and rice, what are some ways that we can take action on what we just talked about?
If you're trying to lose fat, cut those two things out, period. Like if you wanted to have it once a week, a small quarter cup scoop, and that's like your main carbohydrate for the day, no big deal. But the people that are eating every single night, you just got to stop. Like those, they have no nutritional value. If you're trying to lose fat, if you're in the state of your life, you're trying to lose fat, get rid of both of those things in your diet. Trying to gain mass could be a great tool depending on how you do it. And please avoid all whole grain versions, as that toxic seed is just not worth it.
Yeah. So we do have a couple podcasts in the past that we talked about these things. We have one about the insulin effect and how it affects fat loss, which we discussed today, and then plants don't want to be eaten. So we will link those, and you guys can find them on our pages as well to learn a little bit more about those things that we mentioned in today's episode. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you did enjoy the discussion on today's topic. Remember, the best time to start living healthier is today, so make sure to take action on the action steps that we gave you right now. If you did enjoy the episode, please give us a review, subscribe to us on YouTube, or follow us on any of our podcast platforms. And then stay tuned to us on social media, where we'll announce new podcasts, talk about things on there as well. If you have any ideas, please reach out to us, send us an email, comment on our video, or send us a message on social media, and we can talk about some of the topics or questions that you guys may have in future episodes. Thanks again, and I hope you guys will join us for the next episode of The Process of Fat Loss.
Have a good day, guys.